Ah, New York City. The Big Apple, the city that never sleeps, where pizza slices are bigger than your head and is a term of endearment. We got tourists snapping selfies with pigeons, hot dog vendors on every corner. It's classic New York, you know what I'm saying? But yo, let me tell you, beneath all that glitz and glamour, there's a whole other side to this city. A side that's wild, wacky, and straight up unbelievable. Buckle up. Today, we're diving into 11 crazy historical facts about NYC that you probably learned in school. All right, let's kick things off with a story that's pure chaos, even for New York City. Picture this. 1863, the middle of the Civil War, and the draft riots are tearing the city apart. And what did New Yorkers decide to do in the midst of all this madness? Have a massive snowball fight. Yeah, you heard me right. While the city was literally going up in flames, people were chucking snowballs at each other like it was some kind of winter wonderland. The Great NYC Snowball War of 1863 just goes to show you, this city has always been a wild ride, even in the darkest of times. Okay, let's switch gears from riots to something a little more appetizing. You might know New York City for its pizza, its bagels, its street meat, but did you know it used to be the oyster capital of the world? I'm talking mountains of oysters, people. Back in the 1800s, the harbour was so packed with these bad boys you could practically walk across them. They were cheaper than a subway ride, more plentiful than pigeons. They were the original New York street food. Imagine, instead of hot dog stands, every corner had an oyster shucker. People would be walking around with buckets of oysters, slurping them down like nobody's business. But sadly, all good things must come to an end. Pollution and overharvesting pretty much wiped out the oyster population. All right, history buffs, get ready to have your minds blown. You think you know New York City, huh? Well, did you know this concrete jungle was once the first capital of the United States? Yeah, you heard that right. Back in the 1780s, New York City was where it was at. George Washington himself took the oath of office right here on Wall Street. Imagine that, the first president sworn in on the street that's now all about money. But hold your horses, folks, because our reign as the capital was short-lived. In 1790, we got kicked to the curb and the title went to Philadelphia. But hey, who needs to be the capital when you're New York City, right? We've got pizza, Broadway, and enough attitude to make up for it tenfold. All right, let's talk about Broadway, baby. The bright lights, the big dreams, the tourists dodging overpriced show tickets. It's iconic, it's glamorous. It's once a Native American trail? Yep, you heard that right. Before it was the Great White Way, Broadway was known as the Wickwasgeck Trail. This was a major pathway for the Lenape people, who were the original inhabitants of Manhattan Island. Can you imagine what they'd think now? Seeing all those flashing billboards, the costume performers, the hordes of tourists, it'd be like, what in the world have you done to our peaceful trail? All right, let's get a little spooky, shall we? You know those subway grates you see steaming on the sidewalks? Ever wonder what's going on down there? Well, legend has it there's a whole other world beneath our feet, a world inhabited by the infamous mole people. Rumour has it there are entire communities living in the abandoned tunnels and forgotten corners of the subway system. Now, before you freak out, the whole mole people thing is mostly an urban legend. But, and this is a big but, there have been people who've made the subway their home. Think about it. No noisy neighbours, no landlords hounding you for rent, just you and the sweet, sweet sound of screeching subway cars. All right, let's talk about one of New York City's most iconic landmarks, Central Park. The green heart of the city, a haven for joggers, dog walkers, and apparently squirrels with a serious nut addiction. But did you know this urban oasis almost didn't happen? And get this, the city basically gave it away for the price of a cup of coffee. $5. Yeah, you heard that right. Back in the 1850s, the city was like, we got this swampy, rocky wasteland. Anyone want it? $5, take it or leave it. Okay, let's talk about the East River for a second. You know, that murky, mysterious body of water that separates Manhattan from Brooklyn and Queens. Now, I'm not saying it's the cleanest river in the world, but back in the day, people used to swim in it. For fun. I'm not kidding. They even had these things called floating baths. Basically giant wooden tubs filled with, you guessed it, East River water. Look, I'm all for a good dip in the water, but even I draw the line at the East River. I mean, they call it murky for a reason, right? All right, let's talk about something near and dear to every New Yorker's heart and stomach. The hot dog. That's right, the humble hot dog, a culinary masterpiece consisting of a sausage and a bun, has a long and storied history in New York City. And it all started back in 1871, when a German immigrant named Charles Feltman had a brilliant idea to sell frankfurters from a pushcart on Coney Island. And bam, the NYC hot dog was born. So next time you're chowing down on a dirty water dog, remember, you're tasting a piece of NYC history. Okay, let's talk about the Brooklyn Bridge, that iconic symbol of New York City's engineering prowess. But before it became the beloved landmark it is today, people were a little skeptical about its stability. So how do you convince people that a giant suspension bridge isn't going to collapse? Well, if you're P.T. Barnum, the circus king himself, you march 21 elephants across it. Yep, you heard that right. In 1884, Barnum paraded a herd of elephants across the newly opened Brooklyn Bridge just to prove it was safe. And guess what? It worked. People saw those elephants strolling across the bridge and figured, hey, if it's good enough for Jumbo, it's good enough for me. And just like that, the Brooklyn Bridge became a symbol of not just engineering, but also elephant-approved safety. All right, let's talk about Wall Street, the financial heart of New York City, and the world for that matter. But before it was all about stocks, bonds, and billion-dollar deals, Wall Street was actually, well, a wall. I know, shocking, right? But back in the 1600s, when New York was still New Amsterdam, the Dutch built a wall to protect themselves from the British and Native Americans. And guess where they built it? Yep, right down what we now call Wall Street. All right, folks, we've talked about a lot of crazy stuff today. Snowball fights during riots, oyster feasts, elephants on bridges. But this last one might just take the cake. Are you ready for this? Central Park, that green oasis in the middle of Manhattan, almost didn't happen. I know, it's mind-blowing. Apparently back in the day, some people thought it was a waste of space. They wanted to build more houses, more factories, more of everything except a park. Thank goodness cooler heads prevailed, because can you imagine New York City without Central Park? I can't even comprehend it. So next time you're strolling through the park, take a deep breath of fresh air and be grateful, because this urban oasis almost didn't happen. New York City, where history is weirder than fiction. So the next time you're walking through these streets, remember you're standing on crazy stories. You're walking where elephants once marched, where oysters were currency, and where snowball fights broke out during riots. It's enough to make you wonder what crazy stories we're making today, right? But hey, that's New York City for you. Always surprising, always entertaining, always keeping you on your toes. Hit that like button, subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Until then, keep hustling, New York.